in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving higher.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. Sitting down with Dawson Tire. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast obviously is brought to you by Dawson Tire and Wheel, the premier ag tire and wheel provider in North America, helping people grow. And once a month I get together with the guys from Dawson because they're kind enough to be a sponsor here on the Moving Iron Podcast. And we talk about everything there is to do about tires. And this week is no different. So I have Eric and John from Dawson Tire and Wheel out there in Gothenburg, Nebraska. And guys, how you doing this morning?
Doing great, Casey. Thanks for having us. Really appreciate the opportunity to be part of what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys being a part of it as well. So there is no lack of things going on. Everybody's got a million things going on right now in the countryside. Everyone's out planting corn and soybeans and getting stuff going. And this year is actually being somewhat cooperative, mostly cooperative, depending on where you're at. But for the most part, it's been fairly cooperative year as far as getting stuff planted. And I guess as you guys talk to your customers around the countryside, what are you guys hearing about planting progress, and what are you guys seeing out there from some of your customers about just the overall ability to get corn in the ground this year?
Yeah, I think this year, like you said, Casey, it's a lot different this year than it was last year. I thought it was interesting that the week before last, it was 27% of the corn was planted, and then this past week on Monday, the reports came in and it was 51%.
Yeah.
So to jump that much in a week has been impressive. And to be quite honest with you, the people that we've talked to, everything seems to be going pretty well. They're getting corn in the ground. The tractors are rolling. Everybody, even with all the doubt that's going on in the public today, it seems like the American agriculture is just steaming on and just doing what it does best.
That's right.
So it's been an interesting spring.
Yeah, it sure has. Eric, as you, as an owner of a company and all the stuff we see going on now with the coronavirus and this social distancing and those kind of things, how's that affected Dawson Tire, and what are you doing different now than you were doing, say, 6 weeks ago?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We did take some of the same measures that most people did, Casey, where we had everybody that could work from home go home and figure that out. It was an interesting learning curve for everyone. It probably took all of 3 weeks to get into the groove and get some effectiveness back, but it's working out. Our biggest goal was keeping our operations and service staff safe and keeping them going, because you can't work on a combine from home, or
it's tough.
A planting tractor or shit out tires on wheels, ship them out. So I think it's been, all the customers, everybody that's come and found the doors locked and read the notes, people have been super understanding and happy to accommodate and very respectful. So that's been good. I'm as far as our business being impacted, I think we're seeing a little more hesitation, a little more cautiousness, but we're still really busy. Through the planning season. Obviously, there's always the last minute rush orders and things people are trying to get done to get ready to get in the field or change something to do a better job. So I'm glad I'm in the world of agriculture. I've got a lot of friends in other businesses, and talking to a friend who was in an office furniture business, and they talked about it going down 95% of their orders getting canceled. That'd just be a real stressful situation. So I'm glad where we're at.
Yeah, me too. It was nice to know that we were needed to go to work every day, and not only had the opportunity to go to work every day, but we needed to go to work every day. So it was a great thing, and I'm glad we're kind of on the tail end of this. We just got to flip the switches back on here and get the American economy back rolling. All right, guys.
I hate to get it border on the political discussion, but I'm also very thankful. I live in Nebraska, and we have a governor that's, I think, has got a lot of common sense. So
Yep.
The next time I see him, if I ever get the opportunity, I'm going to tell him thank you.
Yeah, he was one of those late to the party when it came to shutting things down, and then what got shut down and when got shut down. And I think quite honestly, I think it was the best move. And now we're getting stuff open back up, and get things moving in the right direction, and keep things plugging, man. So I'm excited about the next couple of months here and what that looks like. So hopefully we can get things turning again. All right. So before we started here today, we kind of asked you guys what was on your agenda, what you want to talk about, and this is one that I never thought about, and it is it's a great trend line to follow. But you brought up trend lines in radial implement tires and what that looks like. So I guess as machines start to get heavier and implements are getting heavier, radial tires are getting to be more of a popular trend on implements.
Yeah, I'll probably kick that one off, Casey, with just something that I would have never thought about. 22 years in the tire business, and the implement world was bias, and from 9.515s, 11L15s, just everything. And I think John Deere started the trend when they started putting those big truck tires on the big planters, the super single truck tires, and started using some truck tire size even in bias. But so I think it's probably been the last 3 years, we actually would sell more radial implement tires today than we do bias. And that's just, it's something real interesting. I pulled some just interesting numbers. That big super single truck tire that's on and I don't know the John Deere planter numbers, but the big John Deere planters, the truck tires that John Deere was putting on, we carried like 9,500 pounds at 120 PSI, and that same tire in a Firestone Destination implement will carry 10,700 at 70 PSI. So it just goes back to that same, you carry more load with the radial tire, your flex doesn't translate to the ground in the same way, and you get a bigger footprint and a lot less compaction. And when you're messing with the dirt right around the seeds, we know how important compaction is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yep, I have noticed that on some of these bigger, like a DB90 or even some DB120s, those kind of things where you've got 90, 120 foot bars out there, and you're pulling those across the field, and then you fold those up and you pull them behind a tractor. There's a lot of weight on that pivot point in the very back, and that's where those tires are coming into play. And like you said, I've seen everything from the big single truck style tire that you'd see back there, and I've also seen some smaller track packages that go along with those. So there's the weight, and not just necessarily the weight either, though, but the speed that they need to pull these things down the road is also starting to play a big factor into what we're seeing as far as transportation tires go.
Yeah, and I think
and Casey, I think the other thing I think is that you're seeing more technology coming into the field. Like we've seen like John Deere with the ExactEmerge, Fendt with the Momentum planter, some of those where every little thing is impacting what you're doing. So you think about it, when we were planting at 2.5 and 3 miles an hour and going through the field with the 12-row planter, that was a whole heck of a lot simpler than going through the field at 10 mile an hour with a 20-some row planter. Right. I mean, it's everything makes a difference now.
Yep. Yeah, I love these conversations, because I know we've got these screens that play behind the counters at the store, and there's I don't know if it's even on there anymore, but there used to be one that popped up, and I don't even remember what tractor it was, but I don't even remember which one it is now, but they were talking about the reset on the 3-point. So they were showing a tractor, little 50 horsepower tractor going through the field and go through a diff, and the 3-point would just stay, the little harrow he was driving would stay right where it's supposed to. And I know the guy that's driving that tractor, like, I just don't know how I can get any better than this, And so now you kind of fast forward here a little bit, and the guy's in the field with a 16-year-old planter going, 3.5, 4 miles an hour, going like this can't get any better than this. So now we got guys out here who are planting 400 to 500 acres a day with a single planter, and some guys, that was their entire 10-week or 10-day job was to plant that 500 acres. So there's the speed and and growth that we've seen in just the ability to get stuff planted has really, really taken off and grown. So on the planter side of that, John brought up that on that new the new Fendt planter, there was the ability to regulate the tire pressure depending where you're at on what you're doing. They're using VF tires to do that. So talk about that technology a little bit, John, and what you're seeing happening there.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'm an old Deere guy, but I do have some AGCO friends, and Fendt is kind of making a push, and a big push of theirs is technology. And one of the things that I noticed was I was reading an article on the new Momentum planter and watching a video off of Facebook from a buddy of mine who's actually down in Louisiana. But it's pretty interesting. They actually use a central fill or a tire fill, where part of the technology goes into the planter is the fact that, one, they're running VF tires, so very high flexation tires for ultra low ground pressure. And the second one is that they can adjust the air pressure in the tires, so they can set positions in the field where the tires can change pressure based on what they need for flotation. And then when they come out of the field, obviously the tires inflate for going down the road. They put a higher pressure in them for going down the road and road transport. So it's kind of, I think I said earlier, that every little thing makes a big impact when it comes to planting and in the way that we're planting today. And I think that's just another indication that now it's not just seed placement and depth and how clean is the row, making sure that everything is, the seeds don't have any bounce or skip when they hit the bottom. Now it's always it's all the way to where it's the tire pressure going through the field. So not just down pressure on the planter, but now tire pressure as well. So kind of all of those things coming together to make it one big package.
Yep. The technology just across the board in seed placement and seed bed preparation and all those things, every little tweak and every little just nuance adds a little bit here and a little bit there. And next thing you know, you gain 2 or 3 bushel across that field. So it makes a big difference in the grand scheme of things.
It's those little things too, isn't it, Casey, that make the difference, because we're not selling the crop for more.
Right.
So it's just those little dials that it's amazing how much advancement there is in that. Sorry, John.
No, I just think it's interesting that, and now you look back and you go, why didn't we do that before? Why wasn't that something that we've always been doing? And I think every time you have an innovation, it's probably the same thing. It's like, well, that wasn't that hard. Why wouldn't we doing it? But it took engineers and big corporations, it took them 3, 4, 5 years to come up with some of these technologies, or more in some cases.
Yeah, the military's been running central inflation systems on their trucks since the 40s.
Yeah, yeah, they've been running that for a while. So that's it's a bigger deal for sure. All right, so last year was an incredibly wet year. Anything that guys could get on machines that would help flotation was a huge deal to get them in and out of the field, whether it was big singles across their combine or their tractors or track systems or whatever it was. And you talked about some sprayer floats that you were doing in Nebraska and Kansas and some of the different stuff you were seeing there that you hadn't seen in a while. So talk about that a little bit and what you see happening there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that last year it was a requirement and guys were buying them just so they could get in the field. And now it's not necessarily a requirement this year, but we're seeing it as it's becoming a personal requirement that they put floats on, and they realized that they were a lot less tired and that their back hurt a lot less, and it was a lot more comfortable going down the road and going through the field with those big tires on than what they had previous years. So it's kind of an interesting scenario. I think Eric told me that story a few days ago. I found it pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that geographically, Casey, there's been areas of the country where floats are a requirement, always have been, always will be. You go into the Dakotas, Eastern Dakotas, even Alberta, Saskatchewan, where they get a lot of wet soil, and it's just every year you do a lot of flotation tires and wheels, especially for sprayers. But last year it was Western Kansas, Western Nebraska, Texas Panhandle. We pulled our sprayer into the field and we're leaving 14-inch ruts. And so we need something different. You sell them floats. And like John said, they're coming back and saying, that's just amazing that the machine just rides so much nicer. It's just, our operators aren't yet, some custom applicators saying, the operators just come back and say, don't ever take those tires off. So it's just
it's amazing, isn't it?
It's kind of funny to think about, but these guys are driving big machines. They still put a lot of hours in. That hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of hours, and today labor is not an easy resource to come by. So think about taking care of your people better by putting the right tires and wheels on it. Maybe that's just a different way to think about it.
That's you wouldn't think about tires being that big of a deal when it comes to just how your overall machine is going to ride and how it's going to make the comfort that comes from that. You think about performance and you think about that and those kind of things, but you never really put the two and two together to get the, you know what, if I put this tire on there, I'm gonna have a little better ride, a little more gentle ride when I'm going through those bumpy fields. So I can see how that's going to be. Do you see that? Do you see more of the customers that you have right now when it comes to sprayers, where they are buying a set of row crop tires and a set of float tires more than they have in the past?
Very much so. It's becoming a very significant or an important part of our business, because what we would say probably 60 to 70% of the machines out there would be running floats, part of the year until a crop comes up.
Yeah. John, have the float sizes gotten bigger? I mean, when I first started doing this, you'd see some guy with like a 710, on there or something like that. And now they've kind of creeped out there to 800, and now they're are they getting wider and wider, or have they kind of peaked here for a while?
It's a good question, Casey. I think we've seen definitely some wider sizes get put on, and there's been some experimentation with getting bigger and bigger. But I think, that 710 is still a very, very popular size. Number one, it stays, it's easy to transport, and it's big enough to give you the flotation that you need, but not so big that, it gets hard to maneuver. I mean, let's face it, when you're in one of those big sprayers, the visibility that you have down to your wheels, front and rear, isn't always that great. So it's, the wider you get, the harder it is to get that thing up and down the road. And one thing we definitely see more and more with sprayers is a lot more road travel than what we see with a lot of machines.
Yep. Yeah. Roading of sprayers is that is getting to be a bigger deal. There's more sprayers that get transported. I mean, as far as hours go, the hours they get put on, significantly more hours in transport than you see actually working in the field. So there's a significant amount there. One question I got about this, so tires on sprayers seem to get taller every year. Seems like they add another inch to the tire they put on that sprayer every year. Do you see that becoming more of a trend where you're going to see maybe a wider, taller, not quite as wide, but maybe a taller tire to maybe offset some of the weight we're starting to see on these machines?
I think Casey, that's you hit it with the weight. The reason they went taller was one of the reasons was just to get more footprint by making the tire longer, where they couldn't go wider, especially in the row crop situation. So it's got to be a limit somewhere. Yeah. We haven't seen a lot of wider, taller. So we haven't seen the flotation tires get exponentially taller, although there's some really big tires out there. But at the end of the day, it's the footprint for compaction and the ride, because the equipment manufacturers have done a lot of things to make the ride better, but the tire is still most of the suspension for the equipment.
Yeah.
And there's airbags and all those things, but they have to be pretty stiff to handle the weight and speed. And so we're still dependent on a tire manufacturer to design something that makes the ride livable.
Yep. That's for sure.
And carry the weight. That's
for sure. But yeah, so there's, have anybody out there ordering a 710 that's 54 or 60 inches tall yet? You don't have anybody doing that?
You mean make it shorter?
No, getting like that 60-inch tall tire yet, and then on a 710. No one's doing that yet.
Well, there's the big Challenger 1000 tractors. There's some.
I guess they do have some big tall tires on those, don't they?
The front wheel assist
monsters.
The front wheel assist tire on that, the flotation size for the front wheel on that is the same as the normal flotation tire for a John Deere sprayer.
Oh, okay. No.
So 650, 65, 38 is the front wheel dual on that tractor.
Yeah, that's they do have a lot of rubber on those Challengers. They are in those fins. They are up there in the air for sure. All right, so here we are in some pretty rough times. Commodity prices are down. Cattle prices are down. Guys are looking at how they're going to kind of bridge this temporary lull in the economy. And one of the best ways to do that is looking at used tires. So if you guys have one of the best selections of used tires that I know of here in North America. So as you look at your used inventory, I guess what are some of the high points, and what are some of the areas where you think you could really offer some good opportunity for folks to get some cheaper opportunities on their retreads on their machines?
Yeah, Casey, I'd say one of the things that we've seen trending and changing this spring, is that we've had a tremendous call for used new takeoffs or 70% wear type tires. So there's been a lot of people, both online, on the phone, that have called and reached out to Dawson about our used selection. I think, Eric, we've got somewhere around $4 million in used tires inventory sitting there waiting. So, I think there's a lot of guys that looked at their tractor and they probably held off trading it in pre-plant, and they know they need new rubber. They know they needed something better to get through the field. And so they're looking at some, how can I get some new rubber, some better rubber on this tractor, get through the planting season, and then kind of make a decision on what's going to happen with it going into the summer months. Yeah.
I will say this, when I'm looking at used equipment that I have on my lot, the first thing I'd want to check is that tire. If you're in that 50% or less range, you're starting to look at the useful life of your tire then. And the first place I wanted to fix on the appearance of that machine is the tires. That's the biggest selling point, because honestly, it's as expensive to retire a tractor these days, brand new anyway, as it is to replace a transmission in some cases. I mean, it's a pretty big expense, and the used tire selection you guys have really make a difference when I'm looking at a tractor that's got 4,000 or 5,000 hours on it, and I can get a set of 70% rubber to put on it. It actually kind of goes with the machine. You know what I mean? It really kind of fits well with what I'm trying to do. So anybody out there listening to this, if you're in used equipment, make sure you check out Dawson Tire and their used equipment selection.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that very few people think about, Casey, but, you kind of came up through used equipment, but the tires are probably the second most expensive wear item on a tractor today.
Yep.
Second or third, engine, transmission, tires.
Yep. And it's, but the thing about it too is, it has as much impact, having horrible tires on a machine have as much impact as a machine that's got blow by. You know what I mean? So it's one of those situations where it's just as important, you know what I mean? Cause the expense, it's not so much, and also performance. I mean, if you got a machine, especially the weight we're lugging around now, if you don't have good grip on the ground, you're not going to go out and you're going to slip and you're going to do everything else. And it's just not efficient. And, like we've talked about through this whole episode here, efficiencies make the difference between, honestly, making a living and not. And this is a great point, great place to go look at, getting that extra little bit of efficiency out there and not paying a arm and a leg for it.
Yeah, I think the other thing with the selection too, and if you talk to the accountants in the organization, they'll tell you we have too much and it doesn't turn enough. And you probably hear that from time to time in the equipment world.
I hear that a lot. Yes.
we give way too much for it. We don't turn it often enough, and the margins sucks. But I took a couple calls even on Sunday this week. Guy looking for a sprayer tire because he blew one. Well, to have one that matches and not have to replace 4, that's another big savings. Yeah. So he happened to have a Continental 650, 65, 38 that he blew. Well, we had one to match, and that means a lot because they can keep going and they don't have to buy 2 or 4 and then they have one sitting in there.
Yeah.
Tree line that they don't know what to do with. So I think selection's important, and I think we've done a really good job, John, of the quality of our trades. We've really upped our game in our check-in process and our certification process, and not just taking anything. So as I go out there and look at what we do have, it's pretty good quality stuff, and I think that is good for the growers and the equipment dealers, that if we say it's 70%, it's all 70% and not stubbled.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing sells better than a machine with mismatched tires. That's always a great selling point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's important. That's the thing about you guys' selection, is that just like the example you put out there, having a machine ready to go, with all 4 tires being the same when it comes in on trade is such a huge deal. Even if you have 3 tires that are 70% and the 4th tire that's a different brand or whatever, that's still 70%. Having 3 Firestones and 1 Continental or whatever you got, whatever your mix is, it just sticks out like a sore thumb, and it's glaring because tread patterns are different and pitch on the treads different. I mean, there's so much difference about it, and it just looks different, and you can tell, and it just looks like junk. So yeah, tires are a huge part of the aesthetics as well as the ride and the performance of the machine. No doubt about it.
Yeah, it seems like your eyes are just kind of automatically drawn to, when you look at a tractor, it's like your eyes are automatically drawn to the tires, and if they're really worn or look bad, it definitely impacts the overall impression.
Absolutely. All right, fellas. Well, I think we've covered it. Anything else you want to throw out there before we shut this thing down for the day?
No, just wanted to ask you quick how you're doing. How's the equipment world from your perspective in today's climate?
Since the first year, things have been doing pretty well. Our shops have been staying busy. Our parts business has been staying busy. We're in that time of the year, I joke that if I woke up from a coma and didn't know what was going on, I wouldn't realize that there's anything happening out there based on the traffic in our stores until I went to Walmart, and then I'd realize that something crazy was going on. But I mean, just going to Walmart, you realize something crazy is going on regardless of what you're doing. But I think the overall, we're in that time frame of the year where equipment sales aren't necessarily the hottest item on the planet, with guys getting stuff planted and those kind of things. With the pace that we're seeing, getting through planting season here, I think that May and June could be some pretty productive months for us when it comes to selling used equipment. The auction market is as busy and full as ever, and it seems like there's plenty of stuff going on there. No let up anywhere. So plenty of things are going on. Plenty of guys are looking for stuff. My biggest concern is, how long can we have $105 cows and 270 cash corn, and how long can that last? And, I think as things get opened back up, we're going to see more things happen. The ethanol deal is a big deal, and honestly, I think as the economy gets opened back up and more people are driving, the ethanol thing will I'm not going to say it's going to happen overnight or anything like that, but I feel like it's going to flip a switch, and we're going to see things start to move in that direction. On that subject, we've got 3 kids. My wife runs them all over Hell's Half Acre when things are going like they're supposed to, and she bought her first tank of gas in 5.5 weeks. since this thing's happened. So it kind of, I mean, I never really gave it much thought and to what was done, but I'm sure most of America is that way, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, you see these videos of oil tankers off the coast of California, and there's, you know, as far as you can see in any direction, they're just out there floating around full of oil. So, you know, it's kind of opens back up. It's going to be a slow and steady rebound. What took 6 weeks to crumble will take probably a few years to get back to the way it was. But I think I guess as I take a look and see what's going on around us, I'm positive still about the overall economy and what we're going to see happen. We just got to get these bars and restaurants and social gathering areas back up and running so we can get the other 60% of our commodity agricultural products into people's mouths and into their stomachs. So knock on wood that we can make that happen here pretty quick.
Yeah. No, it's good. Good to catch up. Thanks for that.
Yeah. No, well, I appreciate you guys being on the podcast. Eric, if folks want to reach out to Dawson Tire and Wheel, what's the best place to do that?
Go to dawsontireandwheel.com online, or our phone number is 888-604-3403. Give us a call. Somebody will be here.
That's great. And John, you got anything else you want to throw out there before we shut things down?
No, I just appreciate the time this morning, Casey.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys being on. I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure to check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. Also check out movingironllc.com for all the latest news as far as Moving Iron goes. I dropped a blog here last week, kind of a continuation of the of what I started there in my little essay series that I'm putting out. Also check out Global Ag Network and all the great podcasters out there as well. So until next time, I am Casey Seymour with Eric and John from Dawson Tire and Wheel. Let's go move some iron, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here.